Shalom Aleichem Internet. Today is March 8th. It is the 26th of Adar. My name is Sandor Gazinski, and here is the weekly TorahByte. So this week's Torah portion is Parashat Vayakhel-Pekudai, and in it we're going to revisit a question that we had asked earlier on Parashat Truma, which is why generally the Torah that is extremely concise and leaves the elucidation and the expounding to the oral tradition, so that we will sometimes learn entire tractates of laws from one verse, or sometimes one word even, or sometimes not even any words, but just the positioning of this verse next to that verse. And all the details and all the laws come out from the rabbis elucidating and defining the various hidden nuances within singular words of the Torah. And yet when it comes to the mitzvah of building a tabernacle, the Torah does not suffice in giving us a general command. And God told Moses, build a tabernacle. God goes and tells Moses every last detail. And not only that, but later the Torah records every last one of those details that God tells Moses. And then, in this week's Torah portion, Parashat Vayakhel, the Torah reiterates all those details as the Torah tells us that the Jewish people went ahead and did as God commanded Moshe, and they went ahead and they built this and this and this, to this and this measurement, etc., using this and this material. Which is very strange, because the Torah, even when it does choose to go into detail about exactly what the command is, usually then signs off and says the Jewish people did as God commanded Moses. But in this case, instead of just signing off with that one line at the end of Parashat Truma or Tetzaveh, we have another two complete Torah portions devoted to giving us every last detail of the Jewish people following through on that command. So we have not one, not two, not three, but four Torah portions devoted just to telling us this one mitzvah of how to build the tabernacle. And what is interesting is that the mitzvah of building this tabernacle was temporary. It only lasted for those 40 years because many of the measurements and the details were not later repeated once the Jewish people built the more permanent temple in the land of Israel. And now we don't even have that temple. So really, all these laws, as much as they are pertain to our daily lives, is more in the sense a symbol, a remembrance. It's not something we practice on a daily basis. Or is it? And this is the point. Why does the Torah give so much focus and so much attention to the exact structure, every minute detail of how the temple or the tabernacle was built? Is because there's an understanding that this tabernacle acts as the edifice for the relationship that the Jewish people, a physical race of this physical world, have with the divine God in heaven. And it comes down to really an argument that broke out between, or debate rather, that broke out between Bezalel, the master architect of the tabernacle, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself. While the details of exactly how and what was used to build each one of the vessels, the chronology was not given, and in there, Moshe and Bezalel found room for argument. They were Jewish, so they managed to find somewhere to argue, and they argued. Moshe says the first things that get built are the primary vessels. Primary means first, and they get built first. So we build the Ark of the Covenant, and then the menorah, and then the table of the showbread, etc. And once those are completed, you build around them the secondary elements, the structure of the temple, the beams and the skins, and etc. Bezalel saw it in reverse. He says, no, first we'll build the outer structure. And then once that is completed and erected, we'll build the vessels, the primary vessels within that. God sides with one over the other. He sides with Bezalel over Moshe. And he says that's the way, in fact, I did creation. The most primary creations came later in the process. And that is the way in general there's proper etiquette, that when you have a guest over who is particularly honorable, you don't invite that guest in and then start preparing everything around them. But rather everything is prepared in advance, and then they come into a completely set arrangement, set table, a set home, etc. This is, in a certain sense, what we did with the Mishkan. We first create the structure. Outside is mundane. Inside the confines of this is holy. And once that area was established, then within that you build the vessels, and so that they are immediately in their holy environment. But there's a more important message, and this is the message as to why we stay so focused on every last detail of the tabernacle and its structure. Because, as we mentioned earlier, Judaism is not a religion, which, in other words, a glorified business arrangement where God is the boss and commanding us and we are the employees and listening. Otherwise, we get fired, and if we do good, we get a big raise known as heaven. That's not the way it works. It's a relationship. And anybody who's been in a relationship can tell you there are two absolutely integral parts to a relationship. And the first part, the primary part of the relationship, is the core passion and feeling that you have for the other in the relationship. That bond, that strength of essential connection that one has. That is the purpose of the relationship. That's at the heart of the relationship. But that is not enough in any relationship. That is the driving factor in the relationship. That's the reason you begin, and it's the reason that it carries through. But a relationship needs more than that. A relationship needs a foundation, a framework, a structure, in order that there should be some sort of security, serenity, a wholesomeness to the relationship, and that the relationship can weather all the turbulence that otherwise comes from the passion side, the stormy side of the relationship. And that structure is integral. It is absolutely necessary. It is what we do on a daily basis. It is the framework of the do's and the don'ts that we have engaged in our relationships. And what the discussion here is that those details are important. Those details matter. Even with the passion and even with the feeling, sometimes it's the little things that can threaten all of those feelings and all those passions. And we need to make sure that we have a clear framework of what it is that we do and what it is that we don't do. You have to create a structure, and then within that structure, imbue the spirit and the passion. And the Torah devotes 4 Torah portions to getting that message across. Make sure we have established an edifice, a structure, and a framework to this relationship. Don't just do as you see or feel fit. Understand that there are things that are necessary and there are things that are necessarily not. And there are things that are too much and there are things that are too little. And then there's doing it just right. And in that, put in the passion. Do these things with passion. Do these things with feeling. And then your relationship will be an everlasting edifice. This is the message of the tabernacle. This is the message of, in general, our relationship with Judaism. I wish everybody success in this endeavor, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos, a wonderful week of both structure and spirit, and look forward to seeing you next week for the next installment of the weekly TorahByte. Shabbat Shalom.